It's Wednesday, October 1st, 2025, and we are on day one of a government shutdown. How did we get here? Well, it's the Republicans' fault. I don't know how to say it more plainly. The Republicans have what I call a political power trifecta. They control the Oval Office, the Senate, and the House. They control all the levers of power. I'm impressed that Senate Democrats held the line and didn't bend the knee this time. And what the Democrats were seeking from the Republicans wasn't a lot. Let's be very clear. The bill that was proposed by the Democrats included government funding to be extended through the end of October while working on a bigger picture plan, and an extension of federal health care subsidies that were set to expire at the end of 2025. That's it. I'm going to repeat this. The Democrats introduced a bill that the Republicans wholesale rejected. They sought an extension of government funding through the end of October, and they sought an extension of federal health care subsidies that were set to expire at the end of 2025. The Republicans, who have the majority, said no. Then the Democrats were asked to sign on to the following. The Republicans introduced a bill that was a short-term measure passed by the House that would keep the government funded at current levels through November of 2025, November 21st specifically. Let me be clear. We don't need continuing resolutions. We don't need kick the can down the road measures to come to a reasonable middle ground between the two parties to be able to keep our government open, running, and funded. I don't blame the Democrats for not approving what the Republicans were seeking. Why would the Democrats seek to continue to fund their own irrelevance? Why would the Democrats seek to continue to fund a government that is destroying the working American family? Democrats said they would not vote for any spending measure unless the Republicans agreed to the extension on the subsidies for health insurance plans that were purchased through the Affordable Care Act. That didn't happen. The government shut down as of 12 o'clock this morning, 12:01. So very quickly, I want to kind of tick through what is being impacted here, because a lot of people were wondering, what happens? What happens when the government shuts down? Oh, I'm sorry. Before I get there, I just want to run through this. So at last count, there were 3 Democrats in the Senate that voted in support of the Republicans' bill. That was Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada, and 1 independent Senator, Angus King of Maine, who caucuses with the Democrats. They voted for the Republican bill on Tuesday. Republican leaders say, according to NPR, they're just going to continue to hold votes on their stopgap funding measures, hoping that they can peel off more Democrats to join them as the shutdown wears on. They figure they had 3 that signed on already before day 1 of the shutdown, so they think they're going to get more. Politico has a great guide today as to what remains open and what is impacted. And it goes through everything, that is kind of relevant to daily life here in America. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but I want to go through some of the most relevant ones in our time together. And then I'm going to talk about a really important lawsuit. The Interior Department that oversees National Park Service remains open, but furloughs 64% of its staff of the National Park Service while the funding impasse continues. The FAA, for those of us that fly, like me, a lot. The FAA, a quarter of the FAA's employees are expected to be furloughed. Around 33,500 FAA employees are deemed to have been necessary to protect life and property, so they stay on the job. But air traffic controllers, who I think are essential to life and property, they work without pay through the shutdown since they're deemed essential workers. And the same goes for TSA's baggage screeners. But guess what? Your student loans, those bills still go out, even during a government shutdown. Your loans also still get dispersed. But hey, we won't support you with health insurance and healthcare subsidies, but we'll make you pay your student loan debt. More than 1 million people serving in the United States military are working without pay right now in our U.S. military. about 350,000 Department of Defense civilian workers were furloughed during the 16-day 2013 government shutdown. So for those of you that are asking, there was a government shutdown in 2013. It lasted 16 days. But there was also a prior government shutdown even after that, right? And that one happened in 2018, I believe. And I'll get that data point for you in a second. Yes, sorry. 2018, December 2018, it lasted 35 days. It was the longest in U.S. history. It went from December of 2018 to January of 2019. The IRS, all of its employees stay on the job for now. So death and taxes, inevitable. Healthcare. This is something that I know is important to a lot of you on the healthcare front. Federal employees that support Medicare, Medicaid, and other mandatory health payments keep working unabated. So will HHS. However, HHS is furloughing some 40% of its employees, and the National Institutes of Health is furloughing 3/4 of its staff. Roughly 2/3 of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention staff are being furloughed as well. But because Donald Trump thinks the fossil fuels are so critical to him and his billionaire buddies, government shutdown doesn't impact the Department of Energy. Workers tasked with processing oil and natural gas drilling permits and coal mining operations still go to work. I want you to understand the priorities of the Trump administration. Let me make it clear. Workers tasked with processing oil and natural gas drilling permits and coal mining operations still go to work. The Bureau of Land Management, which oversees millions of acres of federal land, those employees are essential. Make it make sense. But hey, if you're on the Special Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, known as WIC, where you get access to fruits, vegetables, infant formula, breastfeeding assistance for nearly 7 million low-income pregnant and postpartum recipients, that'll last about a week, and then it's gone. So fossil fuels, drilling, drill, baby, drill, that shit is so important that remains funded and operational during a government shutdown. But hey, if you need infant formula and breastfeeding assistance and supply to fresh fruits and vegetables for nearly 7 million of low-income pregnant and postpartum recipients, oh my gosh, you don't get it. You don't deserve it. You don't get it. I mean, I'm going to use the word deserve because that's exactly the message that's being sent here with the priorities, right? So a really important lawsuit was filed yesterday on September 30th in anticipation of the government shutdown. It probably went without your notice, but I'm bringing it to your attention partially because I am proud that Democracy Defenders Fund, an organization with whom I work, we are a part of the lawyers that are representing the plaintiffs in this case, but it deals directly with an incredibly nefarious and evil plan by the Trump administration to be able to just wholesale get rid of federal workers under the guise of this government shutdown. Filed in the Northern District of Florida, the San Francisco Division, it was filed on behalf of the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO, which was referred to as the AFGE, a few of the locals of AFGE, 1236, 3172, as well as the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFL-CIO. And it was filed yesterday, and it explains that the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, last week, knowing that we were on the verge of a government shutdown, issued a memo that threatened that if congressional Democrats didn't agree to the Trump administration's demands and the federal government shuts down, that there would be mass firings of federal employees, period. Now, it's not furloughed, right? Because there's two different types of employee classifications during a shutdown that I want you to be aware of. Pursuant to federal law, two categories exist for federal employees. You have accepted employees, those who continue working during the shutdown but don't get paid until the appropriations have resumed. So you have accepted employees, and then you have another classification called non-accepted employees. They are furloughed during the shutdown, and they get their back pay after the shutdown ends. Those are the two classifications. There is no classification called reduction in force. I'm firing your ass because there's a government shutdown. That is not only illegal, but that doesn't exist. Under federal law and just under the canons of decency, that doesn't exist. This OMB memo takes the legally unsupportable position, as set forth in our lawsuit, that a temporary interruption of appropriations eliminates the statutory requirement for all unfunded government programs and directs all federal agencies to, quote, use this opportunity. They're so brazen, they don't even try to hide it, right? To use this opportunity of a shutdown to consider reductions in force. RIFs, remember how we've been going through all of that bullshit since DOGE started at the beginning of the Trump administration? Quote, rooting out fraud, waste, and abuse. Well, fraud, waste, and abuse is sitting in its big fat ass in the Oval Office, but RIFs have been rampant across the federal government, and it's been horrifically impacting Americans. And now Russell Vogt and the OMB, they want to use this shutdown as an opportunity. I mean, they're literally saying, use this opportunity to use RIFs, reductions in force, for any programs for which funding has lapsed and that are not, quote, priorities of the president. This weekend, the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, and OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, told federal agencies that federal employees could work during the shutdown to effectuate these RIFs. So, and by the way, this directive is not only contrary to federal law, because RIFs are not a permitted or accepted function that can lawfully continue during a shutdown. So let me make this plainly clear. The Office of Management and Budget and the Office of Personnel Management are telling its federal agencies that employees can work through a government shutdown in order to do what? To fire, through a reduction in force, federal employees. Like I said, it's so brazen on its face, it's offensive, but that's why we're paying attention, and that's why we sued. The threat of massive layoffs was repeated and reinforced just 2 days ago by the White House press secretary, who, when asked whether there's going to be mass layoffs of federal employees, she answered, quote, there will be if Democrats don't keep the government open, end quote. Again, not us. Now, the lawsuit explains who the plaintiffs represent, and they represent the largest unions of federal employees, federal civilian employees. They include nurses, correction officers, childcare providers, sanitation workers, school bus drivers, civil engineers, policy analysts. They are the people that keep our country running. And it goes through the history of the Trump administration's ordering through DOGE of the RIFs, the firings, the, quote, voluntary resignations, etc., right? And the Office of Management and Budget's lapse memorandum, as it's called, expressly attributes any possible shutdown, as well as any reductions in force that are claimed to be necessary because of this shutdown, which is a lie. They attribute all of this to the actions of congressional Democrats, which is just blatantly partisan hackery. This lapse memorandum, courtesy of Russell Vogt, is a partisan attempt to pressure members of Congress to accede to the Trump administration's demands in negotiations over a continuing resolution, and to punish federal employees and the labor unions that represent them if those members of Congress do not surrender to the president's demands. Then, as we have seen, and there is a lawsuit now filed against HUD because of this, on HUD's opening page on the internet, it says, quote, the radical left are going to shut down the government and inflict massive pain on the American people unless they get their $1.5 trillion wish list of demands, end quote. We know that Trump and the administration is running around lying and saying that healthcare that we are seeking, healthcare subsidies that we are seeking for Americans, millions of Americans, they are lying and saying it's only to be given to illegal aliens, quote unquote. That is a fucking lie. Not only does it demonize immigrants, right? It's just racist on its face. But what does it do? It perpetuates a lie that the fair and honest, treatment that Democrats are seeking for Americans, that is a bad thing. Quote, illegal aliens, and I'll use their phrase even though I don't like it, they don't get health insurance from us. They don't get free health care from us. I don't care who the hell tells you this. If they repeat that talking point to you, they are the dumbest shit you have met. Because it's not true. So instead of Trump prioritizing trying to work with Congress to be able to get us across the finish line with something that works for both parties, Trump posts this bullshit that you're seeing right now. This racist bullshit, this artificial intelligence generated bullshit. That's what Trump does. He's a fucking child. Fucking child. The plaintiffs in this lawsuit each represent and have as members federal employees who work in agencies that will be shut down as a result of the pending lapse in appropriations and that were directed by the Office of Management and Budget that their programs will no longer be statutorily required and that they should implement large-scale RIFs. Those federal employees will lose their income, their health benefits, and other incidents of employment if subject to a RIF, causing severe irreparable harm to them, their families, and their communities. The lawsuit asserts 3 claims against the federal government and seeks a declaration that OMB and OPM have exceeded their statutory authority and to set aside this lapse memorandum and to give injunctive relief both preliminarily and permanently. These are the lawsuits that have to happen, people. I am grateful that we can fight with incredible coalition partners at the AFL-CIO, at this American Federation of Government Employees, and also working with Altshuler-Burzon, which is an amazing law firm in San Francisco, and Democracy Forward. These are the types of battles that we have to fight, people. We will be following closely when we get a date for the preliminary injunctions, but we also will be making sure that we hold power to account. You cannot use a government shutdown as an excuse to illegally fire through reductions in force government employees. It's just horrific, and it's cruel, and it's arbitrary, and it's disgusting. And I wanted you to be aware of what they're trying to do here. And I want you to share this video far and wide. I want people to understand what is at stake. Stand firm, Senate Democrats. Stand firm and stand tall and be proud to know that we are supporting you. But to the rest of us, when we see our neighbors, our loved ones, our friends, our acquaintances being impacted in our communities by this government shutdown, let's be there to help them. Let's help them in small ways and big ones. Let's make sure we take care of them. So we've got some Mean Girls level BS going on right now by Alina Habba, Pamela Joe, and I guess Todd Blanche doesn't want to miss the chance to show his petty, bitchy resting face kind of energy here. So let's talk about the updates. As you'll recall, just a few days ago here at the Katie Phang News Channel, we had talked about the prospect of Alina Habba being unemployed as of Tuesday, July 22nd, which was yesterday. And we talked about why. It's because, 1, she's a partisan hack. 2, she has no prosecutorial experience. And listen, I would forgive that if the parking lot lawyer actually had some real legal experience, but she doesn't. 3, let's just go off her track record alone. It sucks. 4, putting aside that she cannot see legitimate rule of law issues to their conclusion, as evidenced by her failed measure of prosecution so far as the interim U.S. attorney in New Jersey, Habba clearly is not fit or competent to be able to have this job. It's a critically important job. So now you have not only Habba, but Pamela Joe Bondi, Todd Blanche, et al., thinking with a level of arrogance that is just so typical of Republicans that they're smarter than the basically 19 federal judges that sit in the district court in New Jersey that, I don't know, collectively have decades more experience than Alina Habba, who then also think that she is not fit to serve in that position as the U.S. attorney, and that given the opportunity, these judges said, you're just not cutting it, Alina. Now those people, Blanche, Bondi, Habba, and others, think that their wisdom should surpass, supplant, and supersede that of all of these federal judges. So let's get into the details here, because that is where the devil lives, that in the White House. So there was a convening of these judges on Monday afternoon. I had reported about that here at the Katie Phang News Channel, that they were going to be meeting. Why? Because Tuesday, ostensibly, was the expiry of the 120-day window by which Alina Habba has been serving as the interim U.S. attorney. And before anybody's like, where'd that number come from? It didn't come from me. It is the number that is ascribed to in the federal laws that say that if you're an interim, adjective interim, then you only serve for 120 days. So given that there may be some confusion as to whether or not it ends yesterday or ends on Friday, big whooping deal of a difference, these judges convened on Monday and they were having this meeting. And part of what they did was they decided at this meeting on Monday that a young woman, but incredibly experienced and by all accounts, the most popular person in the United States Attorney's Office, which you and I both know must have killed Alina Habba. Because again, mean girl energy is totally Alina Habba. Regina George, 100%. Although actually wouldn't that presume that Alina had some measure of popularity, because it sounds like she didn't. So these judges decided that the first assistant U.S. attorney, and so it's basically Alina Habba and then this young woman, that her name is Desiree Lee Grace is her name, and that Miss Grace would end up being the U.S. attorney. Okay? So no ironies here. Clearly, Alina Habba must think that this woman is incredibly competent and capable. Why? Because Alina actually appointed and gave the first assistant U.S. attorney position to Desiree Lee Grace earlier this year. So it's not like Alina could turn around and say that this woman wasn't qualified to have the job. So these judges convene and they enter an order. And I'm going to read the order and you're going to see it on your screen right now. And this is what the order says. Ready? It's very short. Standing order signed by the Chief Judge of the District of New Jersey. Her name is the Honorable Renee Marie Bumb, B-U-M-B, a Republican president nominated appointed federal judge. Okay, so according to this order, the United States District Court for the District of New Jersey appoints Desiree Lee Grace as the United States Attorney for the District of New Jersey. The appointment is effective July 22nd, again yesterday, or upon the expiration of 120 days after appointment by the Attorney General of the interim U.S. Attorney Alina Habba, whichever is later. So look, it hedges, right? Because apparently there is a kind of grace period of about 4 days maybe on this. And so these federal judges said, you know what? And trust me, federal judges know how to draft orders. These federal judges said, you know what? We're going to say it's either effective Tuesday, July 22nd, or on the expiration of the 120 days, whenever that is, which some people say is this Friday. Done and ordered in Camden, New Jersey, this 22nd day of July, 2025. That's it. It's an order, people. Look at the top of the language. Standing order. Meaning it's a judicial order. Meaning it has to be obeyed and complied with. And once again, we have a glaring example of how the United States of America, via the Trump administration, via these people in the Department of Justice, think that they don't have to listen to orders. Because within hours of this order being entered and within hours of Miss Grace being appointed the United States Attorney in Jersey, the current Attorney General, Pamela Jo Bondi, posts on social media. And we got to go here for a hot second. The level of social media posting by people in the Department of Justice suggests that these people don't have anything better to be doing, which they should be. But anyway, this is what Pamela Jo posts. Let's check out what she says. She says here that Alina Habba has been doing a great job at making New Jersey safe again. Questionable. Not questionable, wrong. It's a lie. Nonetheless, politically minded judges refused to allow her to continue in her position, replacing Alina with the first assistant. Politically minded judges. Accordingly, the first assistant U.S. attorney in New Jersey has just been removed. Okay, no. According to this judicial order, she pretty much was the U.S. attorney, so Alina gets it wrong once again. This Department of Justice does not tolerate rogue judges, especially when they threaten the president's core Article 2 powers. Okay. The president did not appoint and install Alina Habba as the United States attorney. She was the interim U.S. attorney, and according to the federal statutes, she was subject to removal after 120 days. But this adjective rogue is very popular in the Trump administration, very popular with Todd Blanche and others. They love to call judges and others rogue. They talk about politicians, people, Americans, when they don't like what the other side is doing. Instead of putting on your big girl panties, Pamela Jo, and actually understanding that maybe there are decisions that are critical to the people of New Jersey that are not partisan and are not politicized, she, as in Bondi, decides that she wants to make it a political thing. So lying down, spinning up in the air, trying to say that other people are making political decisions. By the way, in case you were wondering, that Chief Judge, Renee Marie Bumb, she was actually a George W. Bush appointment, in case you were wondering. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, apparently, and according to reporting, and this is kind of crazy, it wasn't just like Desiree Lee Grace was said, you are being removed by Pam Bondi as the U.S. attorney in New Jersey. According to media reports, she received an email on Tuesday, and this is according to the New York Times. An email was received by Ms. Grace on Tuesday informing her, quote, that she had been fired. Fired. And then I was like, okay, fired? What does fired mean, right? Because fired could be you've gotten fired from your job as U.S. attorney, but hey, you still get to work in the Department of Justice. Well, more reporting suggests that she actually was literally fired from the Department of Justice. I'm not kidding you. That's what it says here in the media reporting, that Department of Justice officials granted anonymity to describe a personal decision, confirmed that Grace had been fired entirely from the Department of Justice. And this is according to Politico's reporting. I told you it was Mean Girls petty stuff, right? So this woman who had been working for more than 16 years at the Department of Justice, who was, again, by all accounts, an incredibly dedicated, devoted, and excellent career public servant, because she was selected by competent federal judges to be able to serve in a role as the U.S. attorney. She not only got fired from the job as U.S. attorney, but she got fired from her job, period, end of story. Does that sound like a lawful termination to you? Okay, so here's the deal. So we know what Bondi's position was on this, right? She clearly was not supportive of this. And then here's how things work, though. So the Attorney General of the United States cannot fire a U.S. attorney. Only President Trump can do it. Convicted felon Donald Trump can do that. And that's according to Steve Vladeck, our dear friend that you guys all know so well. He's a constitutional law professor at Georgetown University. He's one of my go-tos. So Steve is like, look, an attorney general cannot fire a U.S. attorney that's appointed by the district judges in this instance as it is, because they were doing it pursuant to the United States Code, pursuant to federal statutes when it deals with vacancies in these positions of U.S. attorneys. Only the president of the United States can do it. I can envision a scenario within which Bondi says, I was acting as an agent on behalf of Trump when I did this. Either way, it doesn't pass the constitutional muster test. And it also, again, just smacks of just retaliation against these judges. Like I just told you, some of whom are Republican appointed judges. And so not only was it wrong on its face to do it, but it's wrong legally what just ended up happening to Desiree Lee Grace. Now, here's the thing, too. The New Jersey senators, Cory Booker and Andy Kim, they made it explicitly, painfully clear that Alina Habba will never get Senate confirmation to be the United States attorney in New Jersey. So there's this process called the blue slip and the return of the blue slip. And it's kind of gone by the wayside when it's come to certain judicial appointments, but when it's come to United States attorney appointments, still applies. So if the state senators, the United States senators from a state, do not support a nominee for a role like U.S. attorney, ain't gonna happen in that state. And Cory Booker and Andy Kim, before this incident yesterday, made it explicitly clear they did not think Alina Habba was fit for the job. And now they are doubly confirming that they do not believe that she is fit for the job, and they will never return an affirmative vote for her to be confirmed as the U.S. attorney. So the fact that Alina Habba thinks, or that anybody in the Department of Justice thinks, including the Oval Office, by the way, that they think that there's a pathway to success for Habba in this instance for this job is freaking nuts. And yet, what does the Oval Office say? This is the Oval Office's response. The Trump administration looks forward to her final confirmation in the U.S. Senate and will work tirelessly to ensure the people of New Jersey are well represented. But here's the thing. The people in New Jersey really don't want this. Why? What has Alina Habba done? Let's refresh your recollection. Putting aside her failed tenure as personal counsel to Donald Trump, She arrested Newark Mayor Ras Baraka and then had to dismiss the charges a week later after she also got excoriated and publicly dressed down by a federal judge for her failure to exercise her prosecutorial discretion appropriately. She has indicted a sitting Congresswoman, LaMonica McIver, which is wrong as well for that same incident that happened within which Mayor Baraka was arrested. She has told her office as the interim U.S. attorney to launch politically charged investigations into the governor of New Jersey and the attorney general of New Jersey. I mean, I could still go on and on and on. So Hama thinks that that is great representation for the state of New Jersey. Well, she's just straight up dumb and wrong. So let's talk about a similar situation. Actually, stand by for a second. I do want to refresh everybody's recollection too. Todd Blanche had decided that, remember at the beginning of this, Todd Blanche was like, ooh, let me get involved in being petty here. So Todd Blanche also on social media, and by the way, using the cesspool of X/Twitter, because suddenly that's, official means of communication for these people. Todd Blanche yesterday stating that the district judges in New Jersey forced out Haba, then installed her deputy, colluding with New Jersey senators along the way. I mean, this is defamatory shit right here. Pursuant to the president's authority, we have removed that deputy effective immediately. This backroom vote will not override the authority of the chief executive. I mean, if there's anybody who knows about backroom deals, it would be Blanche, it would be Trump, it would be Bondi, it would be Haba. I mean, these people know what they're talking about. But when they're accusing sitting federal judges of colluding, that's some strong language. When they're accusing and alleging that federal judges have done some type of backroom deals, has some nefarious kind of connotations, no? I mean, it's pretty damn defamatory. And I just think, strike that. I know it's just more indicia of the lack of respect that this administration has for the judiciary. And I have said this for weeks. The judiciary needs to stiffen that spine a little bit. Grow a pair, right? Like, let's show the executive and let's show these people that are actually, ironically, within the same branch of government, if you're at the Department of Justice, although kind of not, but show them, federal judges, that you're not going to take this lying down, because that is an incredibly, incredibly rude and disrespectful attack on your credibility as a judge. So here's the deal. And by the way, this is not just limited to Alina Haba. You want to know what's going on here? Let's talk about what's going on here. Last week in Albany, New York, same thing went down. A Trump pick, a guy by the name of John A. Sarcone or Sarcone III, Sarcone III, if you want to look him up. He was an interim U.S. attorney in New York, in the Northern District, right? Up there near Albany. So his term expired. And the judges were like, ain't gonna happen either. We don't want him. And so the judges were like, we're not voting for this guy. Okay. So what do they end up doing? You're gonna like this. They end up doing, as in Bondi and Trump and the DOJ. The DOJ appointed this Sarcone guy as a, quote, special attorney to the attorney general, as well as the first assistant United States attorney in the Northern District of New York, giving him two hats to wear, even though the guy's not competent to wear even one. And so the Sarcone now, pursuant to the Vacancy Reform Act, he'll now be serving as the acting U.S. attorney for at least 7 months. I mean, these people are tone deaf, no? Like, if these judges are telling you that they don't respect somebody to be able to serve in this capacity as U.S. attorney, you're not going to shove this person down the judges' throats as well. I mean, I just want to make sure it's clear. Does that mean then those are rogue judges in the Northern District of New York? Just like the rogue judges in New Jersey? Again, that adjective rogue is only used when people on the other side are doing something you don't like. It is not grounded in fact or reality. I mean, truly, the Republicans are living in an alternate universe. They are truly the party of alternate facts, are they not? Let's talk about this Sarcone guy briefly before we part ways, because you got to really know what this dude's all about. This Sarcone guy, apparently at a news conference in May of this year, apparently showed his ignorance of the First Amendment as well as legal limits that are placed on the telecom industry. And this is according to the Times Union, a publication out of that area. And then in June of this year, he called 911, he did not call 911, but he called the cell phone of the Albany County Sheriff Craig Apple. Okay, so he accuses an undocumented immigrant from El Salvador that the guy was wielding a knife and tried to kill him outside of a hotel in Albany. So instead of calling 911, he calls the Albany County Sheriff's cell phone. Then, after surveillance footage was reviewed and released by investigators, it actually showed that this man did not even come close to Sarcone with a weapon. And so even though local prosecutors had charged this man from El Salvador with attempted murder, it was downgraded to a misdemeanor. This is John Sarcone. Okay, I'm still going. Apparently, Sarcone stated in an affidavit, because you know what that means, affidavits, that his in-district residence was a boarded up and vacant building in Albany's Sheridan Hollow neighborhood. In response to this reporting from the Times Union, the U.S. Attorney's Office dropped the Times Union from the Northern District of New York's media distribution list. Sarcone is also on record having said that Democrats are, quote, evil. These jobs as United States Attorney are so important. They are the top federal prosecutors in these particular jurisdictions. And instead of putting people there that are going to keep those communities safe, that are going to ensure that the rule of law is defended, that they're going to run an office that's going to be staffed with competent people. And by the way, you know what? I'm going to say in fairness, these line prosecutors that are kind of stuck in this kind of like purgatory of hell of having to serve in these roles. I mean, listen, maybe some of them like the fact that it's Alina Habba, who knows? But here's the thing, like they need to continue to do their job with clear leadership. And clear leadership is not defined by an Alina Habba tenure as the U.S. attorney. So it's a showdown. I mean, if you look at all the headlines right now, it says showdown, and it's accurate. But it is very Mean Girls. It's very petty. It's very small-minded. It's very childish, and it's very serious all at the same time. But this woman, Desiree Lee Grace, I went to her LinkedIn profile yesterday to kind of check her out a little bit more. This woman has had so much pride in the job that she has done as a federal prosecutor. She's a career public servant. And this idea that she is now being branded in some way as being complicit or that she had some role in getting, which otherwise for her probably was her dream job, to be the United States attorney, I think it's disgusting. But I'm not surprised, right? That this type of behavior that is just churlish and childish and disgusting is coming at the hands of Pamela Jo Bondi, Alina Habba, Todd Blanche, and others. Not surprised. It's par for the course. But we should be watching these things carefully because it shows, again, another level of defiance of judicial orders, because this is a judicial order appointing this woman. And now we have an attorney general who says, screw your orders, federal judges. I'm going to fire this woman, even though she can't, as the attorney general. Be mad, be outraged, demand accountability. Watch this space always here at the Katie Phang News Channel. Spread this video. Tell others to subscribe so we can continue to build a high information America together and people can understand what's at stake and really how everything is happening behind the scenes. See you soon. Katie Phang. So in a time of, I would say, incredibly partisan politics, there's always been a particular congressman that comes top of mind when it comes to working in a bipartisan way to get things done. And that would be Congressman Tom Suozzi from New York's 3rd District. And actually, Congressman, I'm so grateful for you to join us today on the Katie Phang News Channel because I do think working in a bipartisan way is a trademark. It was a part of your campaign when you got to Congress. It's been something that you've been really devoted to. And in the interest, in the pursuit of that, you sent a letter to Donald Trump, the president, on June 18th, calling for bipartisan action to be able to provide pathways to citizenship for people that have been in the United States that may be undocumented in terms of their immigration status, but have been contributing members to the fabric of our communities that have not gotten into trouble, have not been arrested, have not had any issues since they've been here, and just happen to have a particular immigration status that now makes them incredibly vulnerable to the mass deportation plan from President Trump. So my first question for you, Congressman, straight out of the gate is, have you received a response from Donald Trump to the letter that you sent him on June 18th?
I've heard from some of his staff members, but I haven't really gotten anything formal to come in for a meeting or something like that. Obviously, everybody's been busy with the big ugly, but now we've got to get down to work on some of these bipartisan things that people are interested in doing. There are a lot of Democrats and Republicans that want to try and do something on immigration. The Republicans are afraid to get out in front of the president. And we have to lean into the fact that the president has said some things that are a little hopeful recently, where he said, we've got all these farm workers that are pretty good people that have been working hard, that their farmers like them, and they may not have the right documentation, and we have to use some common sense. So let's lean into that and say, yeah, we agree. Let's figure out, it doesn't have to be a pathway to citizenship. It could be a pathway to just legalize them so that they can work and they can pay taxes and they can stop looking over their shoulders and they can live their lives. Same thing with hospitality workers. Trump's had undocumented people working for him for decades. So he's well aware of how important this is to a lot of businesses throughout our country. Healthcare workers. There's so many people in our country that would fit under the rubric of non-criminals who have been here for a decade or more, who have otherwise been following the rules, going to work 6 days a week, going to church on Sunday, who just want to live a decent life. And let's not rip them away from their families and from their jobs, and let's get people to work together.
So, Congressman, it sounds reasonable. And I guess I have a couple of follow-ups to what you had to say, though. One, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head, didn't you? Donald Trump is known for being incredibly self-serving. He's not one for being incredibly magnanimous. And he does have golf clubs, hotels. He does have a massive footprint in those spaces that would militate in his favor if he were to be able to find some type of kind of neutral place to provide for an immigration kind of pathway for people that are coming here. I mean, listen, he also specializes in temporary visas. But how does that reconcile then, Congressman, with his publicly announced and now supported by what I call the big bullshit bill, which is not your words, mine, but the sheer amount of billions of dollars he's putting in for immigration enforcement? How do you reconcile what he's saying about trying to help people in agriculture or the service industries and the amount of dollars he's putting behind making sure that immigration is the highest spend that our federal government's going to be doing in the upcoming years?
Listen, all this money being spent on enforcement under the big beautiful bill, the big ugly bill, the big B bill that you call it, is scary, because it's not just about going after violent criminals. There are a lot of innocent people that are getting caught up in this who are terrified. There was just a report in my local paper today. I was a former mayor and a county executive who oversaw the 11th largest police department in the country. Undocumented people are not reporting crimes. Why? You're walking around with cash in your pocket. You worked as a landscaper for the day. You got paid. You get robbed.
Yeah.
If you're afraid to go to the cops to report a crime, where do you go for protection? Well, that's how you create an underground economy and gangs, because that's where you go for protection. So we don't want undocumented people to be afraid of local law enforcement, which is what's happened over the past 6 months. That's a recipe for much worse crime. So we need to recognize that are people that have been in our country for 10, 20, 30 years that are otherwise playing by the rules and trying to live their best life here in this country. And we have to build a coalition of businesses that are counting on these workers, badges, law enforcement that says, we don't want to mess up our local law enforcement, handle this at the federal level. Finally, after 30 years and 40 years of not dealing with this, finally deal with it. So we'll be okay at the local level for law enforcement, business badges, and the Bible. People that just care about other people that are, saying, hey, let's not separate families. Let's not take a kid that came here when they were 5 years old and has been living in the United States of America for 20 years and graduated from high school or college or is working a job or is a veteran and try and send them back to a country they don't even know. That doesn't make any sense. So let's build a coalition of business badges in the Bible. Let's get Democrats and Republicans to stop fighting each other and start fighting our common enemy, which is the organized crime and cartels that have been exploiting people by bringing them to the southern border, getting paid $10,000 a person and exploiting them on the way and telling them how to game the system. And let's do some legislation that, one, secures the border, two, fix the broken asylum system, and three, let's legalize 5 or 7 million people that have been here for 10 years or more that have otherwise followed all the rules.
So in order to do this, you have had conversations across the aisle with members of the GOP. But I do think you also are right that they're terrified of getting ahead of what their, leader tells them to pretty much take a position on. How do you think Republicans, because I think there've been a couple of Republicans that have been vocal about their support of some amnesty or some type of pathway to legalized citizenship status or legalized status here. How do you get them empowered to be able to speak out publicly to support common sense, bipartisan immigration legislation?
So this has been going, I've been working on this for a long time. And certainly since I came back after I won the special election back in February of 24. And so, and I've been talking to a lot of Republicans, and there are so many people are interested in getting something done. I got one guy is a conservative right-wing Republican. He's got 30,000 Dreamers in his district from a border state. Former Navy SEAL guy, conservative, but he wants to do something. I talked to leaders of committees of the jurisdiction and said, listen, we'll do something, but only if the president, leads the way. So the president has opened a big door here when he came out and said, we've got these people at the farms, we've got these people in hospitalities that are good people. We have to use some common sense, even though they don't have the proper documents. Now, when he first said that, right after that, Stephen Miller came out and, boom, we're gonna
exactly, yeah, exactly.
But then the president came out again this past weekend and said something about the farm worker. I love the farmers. That we don't want them to get. We don't want to get rid of their workers, and then they got to hire the murderers. But the bottom line is there's an opening here, and we have to try and run into it. And, we all know the stuff we don't like about the enforcement efforts. We all know the stuff we don't like about the president, quite frankly. We have to lean into the things that we can grab onto as an opportunity to legalize the Dreamers, to give them a pathway to citizenship, to legalize the TPS recipients, temporary protective status, people we invited here 20 and 30 years ago because they had a civil war or an earthquake and have been living here for all this time, working and productively raising families. Legalize the farm workers and the healthcare workers and the hospitality workers and the other essential workers. There's a path forward here if we can get the politics right. And another way, in addition to getting the president to do this, is to get this outside coalition of business badges in the Bible to go to their members and say, hey, you're going to kill my business if you get rid of these guys. I need you to do this. Hey, this is bad for law enforcement that everybody's going underground like this. Hey, this is very unchristian of you, or very whatever religion you are, to treat people so inhumanely. So we have to, that's politics. I mean, you have to try and influence elected officials that the pressure from you is going to be greater than the pressure that's trying to block you. And again, the president's given us an opening here. We have to lean into it.
Okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, and is it fair to say then, Congressman, that it's almost like it becomes like a wedge. It's something that becomes something that opens the door. So even if it doesn't cover the entirety of the population or the communities of migrants that we would love to have covered, at a minimum, it opens the door to allowing some measure of immigration status to be afforded people, even if we all know that the bottom line is it's to help maybe the agriculture industry's biggest leaders to make sure that they're still making money, et cetera. I mean, I think what I'm hearing is
like that. It's not just agriculture. It's agriculture, it's healthcare, it's hospitality, it's construction. This is throughout the entire economy. But then that covers the waterfront then, Congressman. The problem is, I understand on July 4th, the president did say, I love the farmers, I love agriculture, and he mentioned service industries, which again would cover his golf clubs, et cetera, Mar-a-Lago, for example. But I just don't understand, and this is not really rhetorical. There are businesses approaching the White House, businesses that are approaching members of Congress that are in all these different industries that are saying the same things. And,
but didn't they say this before the bill got passed, and they saw how much was going to be used towards immigration enforcement and detention? In a way,
the president, having had success on the border where things have slowed down dramatically because of their enforcement actions, and now having won this battle to do the enforcement stuff, this is an opportunity to say, okay, you've had a great success on securing the border. You want to make it permanent, so you can't do that through executive order. You need to have legislation passed. And in addition, you want to try and stop getting all these people caught up in this enforcement trap that are otherwise innocent people. Because number one, it's not wrong to do that. It's inhumane, but it's going to hurt you politically. I mean, these stories that come out about, the two Marines that bring their mother to their hearing and then she gets deported. I mean, or the guy in my district who's working at the bagel shop, who's been there for years. He's, everybody's sending me pictures of him dressing up as Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, and all the kids love him. We got to save, this is going to hurt them politically, and they know that. And government is not always good at doing things effectively and efficiently and following the wall. And they're going to do a lot of ham-handed stuff that a lot of people are going to be like, whoa, I didn't sign up for that. I thought you were going after the violent criminals. And so that's going to hurt them. So we've got to just keep on pushing and pushing. And listen, I'm a first-generation American. My father was born in Italy. When I think of America, I define America through the immigrant story, the American dream. And it kills me that this has become such a negative in our country, when for me, it's like, it's everything. And when I was the young mayor of my hometown in 1994, we had day workers from El Salvador up and down the street corners gathering for work every day. And I set up the first day worker shape-up center 30 years ago on the East Coast of the United States of America, where you could gather for work. If you got hired and they didn't pay you, we'd make sure you got paid. If you didn't get hired, you could stay and learn to speak English, or you could learn a job skill. And I had partners with Catholic Charities and La Fuerza Unida. And I see those same guys that 30 years ago were on the street corners, have their own businesses, have their own homes. Their kids went to school with my kids, and they're just trying to live the American dream. And, like I said, they go to work 6 days a week. They go to church on Sunday. Let's treat people like human beings. Let's understand. Listen, we had to secure the border. There was nobody could say that was okay. It's not okay to see hundreds of thousands of people coming across the border in a seemingly chaotic way. We all should support the idea of getting rid of violent criminals. Okay, that's anybody who says, "Oh, I don't know," no, we support that. But let's tell these stories about these individual people that are really trying their best to live a good life and contribute to society, and figure out how they can be legalized going forward. And it doesn't have to be citizenship. The Republicans want to say, "Oh, you just want a bunch of people to vote." No, forget it. You don't have to make them citizens. Just make them legal, so they can't vote.
But I think what's problematic, though, is you mentioned TPS, temporary protected status. The Trump administration has revoked TPS for many people, as well as humanitarian parole and other legal status that was not full citizenship. I mean, people who have actually gone to court, for example, congressmen, when they have been trying to get to that point where they could be legal permanent residents or U.S. citizens or naturalized citizens. And now we hear that the civil division at the DOJ under Trump is going to go after naturalized citizens to denaturalize them. I mean,
that would be, they'll lose on that. That's just crazy.
But they should lose on birthright citizenship too. I mean, and they're challenging that. I mean, it seems to be a game of whack-a-mole,
American people will never support the idea of getting rid of birthright citizenship. So,
but he's still going after it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's like, I hear you so clearly.
He's feeding his base red meat. He's feeding them what they want, and then only Nixon can go to China. Only somebody who's got a reputation of being tough on the border can be the one to finally make the deal. So do I like what the president's doing? I don't like a lot of the stuff that he's doing, but it is what it is. And right now we've got to take advantage of what he's saying and figure out, how do we make a deal? How do we build the coalition? How do we build the Democrats and Republicans and actually get something done to actually save some people's lives? That's got to be our goal. When everything's said and done, we don't have to do the perfect deal to get everything done. We got to save 7 million people's lives so that they can live and work here and live a decent life. And that would be a major success.
Yeah. And, in avoidance of confusion, I want to make sure it's clear. I agree that if there is even a small wedge to get that door open, that we should take it and run. I guess my only concern is, and this is not to dissuade, obviously, your pursuit of the bipartisan legislation. It just sounds to me accurately so, because you said it and you're right. Your Republican brethren and colleagues, they take their cues from Donald Trump. And so Donald Trump, as we also know, is very capricious. He'll say stuff one day, and then the next day, as we saw happen just a few weeks ago, when he made the announcements about agriculture and the service industry and the hospitality industries, and then Stephen Miller got in his ear, or somebody else got in his ear, and the next thing you know is there was the full announcement to ICE to crack down across the board who didn't care, and they went and did it.
And then he said it again this week. He came back again this week. So
I know on July 4th, he said
we have to accept the fact that we're dealing with somebody, like you said, is mercurial, or capricious. And so that's the reality of what we're dealing with. But he's the president of the United States of America. He's got outsized power right now, and he's a political animal on top of it. And he's coming back on several occasions to the same thing about, hey, maybe we should figure out a way to legalize these people. So we have to run into that. It's like the Cuban Missile Crisis with Kennedy. Khrushchev at first said he wants to negotiate something, and then they sent in a very negative message, like they were about to. He says, we're just going to ignore that one. We're going to focus on the one where he says he wants to negotiate. So we have to focus on. Listen, this is not easy. This is not straightforward. This is not. I'm not saying yes, it's definitely going to happen.
No,
but this is what we have to try to do, because our goal should be to actually solve the problem and make people's lives better. And the only way in this environment to do that, we have legislation, we have litigation, we have motivation. Okay. Legislation, we're in the minority.
Yep.
You got to make a deal. Litigation, every lawsuit you can imagine is being filed out there. We're winning some, we're losing some, but that's only so far we can go. And mobilization, that'll matter in 2026 when we try and win the House back. But right now, we got to try and cut a deal to try and save some people's lives.
Congressman, one of the things that I've also noted about you in your tenure in Congress, and actually before then in your years of public service, is you always stay attuned to your constituents and what's going on and what matters most to them. Have you had any feedback post the passing of the BBB last week? I know it was a holiday weekend, but have you heard from constituents on both sides of the party affiliations as to a reaction to this bill passing?
I'm hearing more from groups of people that are going to be affected, like hospitals and not-for-profits and people
veterans,
that really understand these issues very well and the damage it's going to do to people's lives. I don't know that the public generally understands how bad this bill is, because the president is a master of distraction. If you follow the course of the big, beautiful bill through Congress, when we were doing our 24-hour overnight hearings,
yep.
What was the big news during when that was going on? It wasn't about our hearings. It wasn't about our debate. It was about the plane coming from Qatar. And then, the week after that, it was about the tariffs in China. And then it was about the bombings in Israel. And then it was this. And he's a master of distraction. So, pickpockets work in teams. One person comes in and bumps into you. And when you're distracted because you got bumped into, the other person picks your pocket. He's a master at taking people's eye off the prize because they don't want to talk about the BBB. Because when everything's said and done, the BBB is a loser politically. They didn't even campaign on the 2017 tax cut because who likes the idea we're going to reduce taxes for the wealthiest Americans, reduce services for some of the lowest income, most in need people in the country, and blow the biggest deficit in the history of the United States of America? Nobody likes that. That doesn't make sense. So,
well, I appreciate you, number one, being a part of this discourse, because I think it's important for the people that are watching right now and that will watch, that they see that you're trying to take a tact that's going to have a result. Because I do feel like sometimes for Democrats in DC, it's like salmon swimming upstream, right? It just gets very, very hard to be able to kind of, or I equate it oftentimes to Sisyphus, rolling that boulder up the hill just to have it roll back down the next day. And I know it ends up being a numbers game at the end of the day, and that peeling off a GOP vote is like an act of God sometimes. And we saw a few of them happen in the Senate last week. But I am interested to see how much kind of traction you get, because I concur that this should not be a partisan issue. I think maintaining the fabric of our country, I'm also a first generation American like you. I think maintaining the fabric of this country is critical and essential to us, ironically, being great. Exactly what Trump says he wants is for America to be great. In order for that to happen, we have to keep our immigrants, because but for your family, but for my family, we wouldn't be here, right? Like we wouldn't be here to be a part of this great American experiment that's supposed to be democracy from what we can
This
tell.
is the greatest country in the world. And it
Amen.
will always be the greatest country in the world because of the people in our country. And most of our country comes from immigrants. So we have to recognize that this is an essential part of who we are. And, I'm the co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus in Congress. I'm the Democratic co-chair. There's about 50 of us. We're pretty evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans. There are people in working groups that have been working for the past several months to be ready for this moment after the reconciliation bill for us to try and propose solutions on immigration, on permitting reform, on debt and deficit. Let's encourage people. I mean, this is what the public is hungering for. I mean, you talk to anybody, the people, can't you guys just work together? Can't you just work it out? I mean, I'm in one of those districts where Trump won by 19,000 votes. And I won by 11,000 votes. So for me to win, I had to get 20,000 people who voted for Donald Trump to actually vote for me as well. And I have some people in one ear saying, this guy is ruining the country. This is the end of democracy. You've got to stop this guy. He's just awful. Then I have other people in the other ear saying, well, you got to break some eggs to make an omelet. And he's shaking things up. And that's what we need. And we got to do this. And we got to follow what he's doing. And, we got to keep going. And then I got most people saying, can't you guys just work together and actually solve some problems? Can't we just get some stuff done? Can't we just, what about me? What do you guys are all fighting. What about me? What about my life? So we have to get back to the basics of like you said earlier, listening to the people and trying to address. The problem with my party is if you ask the American people, what are the top 5 issues you're concerned about? They say the economy, immigration, taxes, crime, and healthcare. Those are the 5 issues they're concerned about. Economy, immigration, taxes, crime, and healthcare. You ask those same people, what do you think the Democrats are focused on? They say choice, LGBT protections, healthcare, protecting democracy, and climate change. All very important issues, but not the issues that are top of mind for the American people. So if you want to work on those 5 issues, you better talk about these 5 issues so you win your race, and then you can actually do something about them. So let's work on the economy, immigration, taxes, crime, and healthcare. That's what the people want. And then we could work on everything if we win the races by addressing what the people are concerned about.
Well, Congressman Tom Suozzi, you have always been incredibly pragmatic. And I think that that's what you brought to the table when you ran for office. And that's what you're continuing to do. So I welcome this conversation again, once we find out whether or not your GOP colleagues are going to kind of put their money where their mouth is and try to help you go to the president and hopefully make something happen for as many people as possible in terms of an immigration pathway.
We have hope springs eternal, Katie. We're going to keep on pushing, keep on working. So thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Always, anytime. Katie